The most powerful man on earth is taking your wife from you, and you stand there watching. You cannot rise from your seat. You cannot utter a single word of objection. 50 more senators fill the room around you, faces drained of color, goblets trembling in their hands. Some are telling themselves this will be brief. You are silently praying that not a single sentence she speaks inside will become your death warrant. The minutes do not pass. They stretch. 20 minutes, torn from a human life, pressing down like 20 years. When the door opens again, they bring her back. But bringing her back is not the point. The emperor calmly returns to his place, refills his goblet, and in front of everyone in the room, begins to describe what happened inside, detail by detail, the way a physician reads an autopsy report. The men at the table look away. Your wife's eyes are fixed on nothing, and you must place a smile on your face. You must tilt your head as though in agreement. You must even show gratitude. Because if you do not, it will not be you who pays the price. It will be your children. This was not a moment of madness. It was a functioning mechanism, a system built with meticulous care to shatter the human soul. And the man who built it had learned everything he knew by watching his own family be destroyed by the emperor before him. His name was Caligula. What he did to Rome was so disturbing, so deliberate, that 2,000 years later, we are still trying to understand how a single human being could construct a psychological war machine at this scale. If you believe that documented records of history's darkest figures deserve to be remembered, consider liking the video and subscribing. Your support helps bring more stories from the most shadowed corners of the human story into the light. Now, let us return to the man who turned cruelty into something approaching an art form. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will only grow heavier. And the most unsettling thing is not what he did. It is that the machine he built outlived him. Before we move to the 5 acts of Caligula's terror system, there is a critical truth you need to understand. He was not born evil. He was shaped. And that process began when he was no older than 7. Picture this. The year is AD 14. A child of 6 or 7 is running across the dusty floor of a Roman military camp. He wears a miniature legionary's armor, small red boots on his feet. Soldiers hardened on battlefields, men who have seized half the known world, are roaring with laughter, tossing him into the air and catching him. They call him Caligula, Little Boots, because he is the son of Germanicus, considered the greatest Roman general since Julius Caesar. The soldiers adore his father, the child they have bound to themselves with something close to love. He is the army's mascot, its lucky charm. Wherever Germanicus marches, little Caligula follows, and the soldiers truly believe his presence brings victory. This child grows up believing he is loved, untouchable, protected by the most powerful army on earth, with no idea what is waiting for him. A year later, his father dies. The official account, a sudden illness. The whispers, poison. The order, it is said, came from someone close to the emperor, perhaps from the emperor himself. By the time Caligula turns 8, the system begins to erase his family. His mother is dragged from her home, charged with treason against the emperor. His eldest brother is arrested, thrown into prison, and reduced to such starvation that he attempts to eat the stuffing from his mattress. His second brother, exiled to an island, ends his own life by beating his head against the walls under the torment of the guards. The young Caligula witnesses every one of these erasures. By the time he turns 19, he is the only one left, the last surviving member of his bloodline. And then, the summons comes. Emperor Tiberius wishes to see him. Capri, a beautiful island off the coast of Italy that Tiberius has converted into a personal fortress, far from Rome, far from the Senate, far from anyone capable of objecting to what he does there. Ancient historians, Suetonius and Tacitus, men who wrote in the shadow of these events, describe Capri as something close to a theater of terror. Tiberius is a sovereign sunk deep into paranoia and corruption, surrounded by astrologers and flatterers, inventing new forms of cruelty to quiet his own unease. This is the atmosphere the young Caligula walks into. He knows Tiberius destroyed his family. All of Rome knows, but he cannot let it show. The smallest glance, the briefest flicker of grief, a single moment of anger, and he dies. And so he does not merely survive, he masters survival. Suetonius's words are chilling. No one was ever a better slave or a worse master. Caligula learns to suppress whatever remains human inside him. He observes, he decodes, he becomes what Tiberius needs to see: compliant, entertaining, harmless. For 6 years, he sustains this performance without a single crack. Then, in AD 37, Tiberius dies. Some say natural causes. Others claim Caligula smothered him with a pillow. However it happened, the 19-year-old former hostage now holds the most powerful office in the world. Rome erupts in celebration. They believe Germanicus's beloved son has come to the throne. They do not know what they have actually crowned. They have made emperor a man who spent 6 years watching one of the most ruthless figures in Roman history, learning, piece by piece, exactly how to break people. The first 7 months appear flawless. Then he falls ill, and when his eyes open again, the man in that bed is no longer the same. What happened during those fevered days we will never know with certainty. But when Caligula recovers, something inside him has snapped open, and Rome is about to face the side of him he has kept hidden until now. What I am about to describe is not a catalog of random violence, not the uncontrolled eruptions of a madman. Caligula constructed a deliberate system, 5 distinct stages of psychological warfare, each designed to target a different dimension of the human soul. And the most disturbing thing about it is how methodical the progression was. Let us walk through it together. The machine's first act, the deified sister. Caligula had 3 sisters, but Drusilla held a place apart. Ancient sources write that the nature of their bond pushed against a boundary that unsettled even Roman society. Whether the rumors of incest reflected reality or not, what mattered was that the public believed them. Caligula did not suppress the rumors. He allowed them to spread. He may have encouraged them. Then, Drusilla died. What followed reveals the core logic of the system Caligula was building. He imposed his grief on the entire empire as an instrument of control. He did not merely mourn. He weaponized mourning. First, he compelled the Senate to deify Drusilla, not as a gesture but as an official decree. Temples were now established at which Romans were required to worship his dead sister. Then he declared an empire-wide period of mourning, and here is where the boundary was crossed. Laughing was now punishable by death. Visiting the baths was grounds for execution. Eating dinner with your family could be cited as a capital offense. Consider this again. For weeks, perhaps months, a smile caught on your face could cost you your life. Think of what it means to live inside that. Your child makes an innocent joke at the breakfast table. Do you laugh? Or do you silence them, correct them? Because a single burst of laughter could mean death. Caligula made Rome a participant in his grief, willing or not. He learned that he could legislate emotion, that he could criminalize joy, that he could force his own interior world to become a compulsory reality for everyone else. And once he discovered he could direct what people felt, he began to test what else he could strip from them. The machine's second act, the imperial brothel. This section is so destabilizing that historians debate whether it truly occurred or whether it was a later campaign of defamation. But the claim in ancient sources is unambiguous. Caligula established within the palace a brothel, not for his personal gratification, but operated as a public enterprise. And it was not stocked with common women. It was stocked with the sons and daughters of Rome's most distinguished families, aristocrats, senators, provincial governors, legion commanders. Criers went into the streets and announced the prices. Separate rates for married women and for unmarried ones. Special fees announced for virgins from senatorial families. The most merciless detail, it is alleged that all of it was recorded. Ledgers were kept. Names, dates, transactions. The bureaucratic accounting of humiliation. Consider the psychological weight of this. If you were a Roman noble, your identity rested entirely on family honor. Your lineage stretched back through generations. Your name was an inheritance. Now your daughter is being proclaimed in the street like a market commodity, and her name is written in a ledger, and you can do nothing, because the price of objecting is death. This was not merely the taking of bodies, it was an assault on the one thing Roman aristocracy held above life itself, their reputation, their lineage, their name. But it was not the end, because Caligula understood something further. Public humiliation is powerful, but private humiliation, enacted before witnesses, is more destructive still. The machine's third act, the hunting feast. Return to the scene. You know the full context now. You are at an imperial banquet. Your wife is beside you. 50, perhaps 100 senators and their wives fill the room. Everyone drinks wine in the shadow of fear. Caligula rises. The room falls silent. He moves with unhurried steps between the tables, his eyes moving over the women. His gaze is cold and calculating. He makes his selection. He stops in front of your table. He looks at your wife. He examines her the way a man inspects a horse he is considering purchasing, her teeth, her hair, her body, studied with careful attention. He asks no permission. He does not address you. He takes her hand and leads her away. You do not move. The man beside you drops his eyes to his goblet. The entire room performs the act of pretending this is not happening, because everyone understands that if you rise, if you object, if a single emotion crosses your face, none of you leave this room alive. Not you, not your wife, not your children. So you sit, you drink, you wait, 20 minutes, perhaps 30. The conversation around you is forced and fragile. Someone's joke hangs in the air unclaimed. Then they return your wife. She does not meet your eyes. And then the emperor takes his seat. He does not leave. He stays. In front of everyone, your friends, your colleagues, your rivals, he begins to recount what just occurred. In cold, graphic detail, he assesses the performance, compares her with other senators' wives, makes his sardonic observations. And you must laugh. You must follow along with his jokes. You must nod your head, confirming that this is acceptable. He does not merely violate your wife, he dismantles you. Everything that makes you a man in Roman society, your power to protect your family, your authority, your honor, he tears away in front of every witness you have in the world. And the next day you must come back. You must smile at the same people. You must conduct yourself as though nothing happened, even though everyone in the room carries the knowledge of what they witnessed. This is where the machine's mastery lies. It does not only crush individuals, it corrupts the social fabric itself. It pushes everyone into complicity, makes everyone a silent witness to someone else's degradation. But we are still in the third act. What comes next is so heavy that modern psychologists have examined it as a clinical example of systematic psychological torture. Because Caligula recognized something, there exists a bond even stronger than the bond of marriage, the bond between parent and child. The machine's fourth act, the grieving father. What follows is nearly unbearable. Take a moment if you need one. Caligula had begun ordering executions not for treason, not for crimes, but because he was bored, because he was irritated, or simply because he wanted to observe the outcome. And he added to this a new practice. If a man's son was to be executed, the father was required to watch. Not from a distance, from the front row. But what transforms this from simple cruelty into systematic torture is a specific episode recorded by the historian Suetonius, the detail that lays bare the full horror of the design. A father watches his son's execution. Immediately afterward, his son's body still warm, Caligula has this man brought to the palace for dinner. The father is seated at the emperor's table, and Caligula watches him. Only watches. He studies the man's face the way a scientist monitors an experiment. Will he weep? Will his grief show? Will even the smallest expression of pain surface? Because if it does, Caligula understands that something inside this man has not yet been broken. A human fragment still intact. And so the father eats food he cannot taste. He participates in conversation he cannot hear, while his son grows cold on a street somewhere outside. And the man who sent that son to his death analyzes the shifts in his face purely for entertainment. This is not only the taking of your child, it is the taking of your right to grieve. It takes the most fundamental human bond between parent and child and converts it from a source of comfort into an instrument of terror. Because now everything you love has become a weapon that can be turned against you. The deeper your attachments, the more exposed you are, the more you are capable of being destroyed. He makes love itself dangerous. But there is something no one anticipated. The machine has a fatal flaw. While Caligula was occupied with crushing senators and nobles, people accustomed to humiliation, people who understood the rules of political survival, people who could justify to themselves the act of staying alive, he makes a critical error. He directs his routine degradations at the wrong target. A soldier, the machine's final act, the wrong man. His name is Cassius Chaerea, a senior officer within the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's most elite protectors, men who stand armed and lethal just steps from Caligula at all hours. Chaerea has a quality Caligula has made into a recurring joke, a high-pitched voice. And Caligula, true to his nature, does not let it go. A new mockery every day, a new humiliation. The detail that reveals how thoroughly normalized his cruelty had become. When the duty of requesting the day's watchword fell to Chaerea, a military procedure, a ritual performed in front of the other guards, Caligula would assign him words like Venus or Priapus, deliberately feminine or sexually charged passwords, phrases designed to draw the other soldiers' contemptuous laughter, day after day, week after week. For Caligula, this was a joke not even worth dwelling on. For Chaerea, each mockery was accumulating like poison. This is where Caligula miscalculated. Senators could endure humiliation because they wanted to live. They had children, estates, lineages to protect. They could explain their survival to themselves. But Chaerea is a soldier, a man trained for violence, someone who stands just steps from the emperor every day, sword at his side. And Caligula had taught him that living under this emperor was not worth the act of living. Because he trusted his system so completely, was so certain that fear would prevail in every circumstance, that he forgot the most elementary rule: do not back a man who can kill you into a corner. What followed lasted less than 60 seconds, but it changed the course of Roman history. And what came after is more disturbing still than anything Caligula did while alive. January 24th, AD 41. Caligula is at the theater. He is in good spirits. Games and performances have been arranged. In a few hours, another entertainment will be staged. Toward midday, he decides to pass through a narrow underground corridor that connects the theater to the palace. A dim passage, rough stone walls on both sides, a tight space. The conspirators have taken their positions. As Caligula approaches, Chaerea steps forward. This is unremarkable. Guards make regular contact with the emperor. He asks for the day's watchword. Caligula, entirely unsuspecting and certain of his own invulnerability, gives a mocking reply. It is the last thing he says. Chaerea shouts, "Take this!" and drives his sword beneath Caligula's ribs. Caligula staggers and attempts to flee, but there is nowhere to go. The corridor is narrow. Attackers block both ends. They fall upon him. 30 stab wounds by the source's accounts. Steel enters again and again. They do not stop until nothing living remains. 4 years of accumulated rage, humiliation, and terror, released in 60 seconds of violence. The monster has fallen. And here is where everything becomes darker still. The conspirators are not content with killing Caligula. They find his wife, Caesonia. She has understood what has happened. She has heard the screams. She pleads. She tries to reason with armed men who murdered the emperor minutes before. They stab her to death. Then they find the children's room. Caligula's daughter, Julia Drusilla, is 2, perhaps 3 years old. The sources differ. A soldier takes the child in his arms. As she cries for her mother, he dashes her head against the marble wall. They want to be certain no heir remains alive, no one who might grow up and seek vengeance. And so they kill a child who has only just learned to walk. This is what happens when the machine collapses. It does not simply stop. It draws everything bound to it down with it. For a few hours, perhaps an entire afternoon, Rome looks as though it might actually change. The Senate convenes. Debates begin. Some want to restore the Republic, to end the imperial order entirely, to return to the old system. For the first time in generations, a genuine conversation takes place about how Rome should be governed. And then the Praetorian Guard makes its decision. While the Senate speaks, the guards loot the palace. They move through the rooms, gathering jewels, money, valuables. One of them hears a sound from behind a curtain. He pulls it aside and finds a man hiding. Middle-aged, a stammer, a limp. Claudius, Caligula's uncle, the man the family considered its shame. Most had seen him as harmless, assumed to be mentally impaired, likely due to childhood illness. The guard does not see an imbecile. He sees a new emperor. The Praetorians hoist Claudius onto their shoulders and carry him to their barracks. They declare him emperor. While the Senate is still debating the future of the Republic, the army has already decided. The system has survived. What is truly disturbing about this story is this. Caligula reigned for less than 4 years. 4 years. In the scale of Roman history, barely an instant. And yet, 2,000 years later, we are still speaking his name. Why? Because Caligula exposed a terrifying truth about power. He demonstrated that the entire apparatus of a state, its laws, its army, its financial infrastructure, its bureaucracy, could be converted into a personal instrument of psychological warfare. He did not operate outside the system. He weaponized it. The accounting ledgers of the imperial brothel, the bureaucracy functioning. The mandatory mourning declared for Drusilla, the legal order functioning. The banquets at which senators' wives were degraded, the imperial protocol functioning. Every atrocity he committed was technically legal, because the law was him. And when he died, the system did not die with him. It simply found a new operator. That is the real horror. Not that one man became a monster, but that the machine he built continued to operate without him. Look at what followed. Nero burning Rome and blaming the Christians. Domitian executing men for looking at him the wrong way. Commodus forcing senators to watch gladiatorial combat in the arena. Elagabalus, whose practices are too disturbing to enumerate here. The blueprint did not disappear. The machine changed its form and went on living, because Caligula had exposed a truth that burned itself into Rome's memory. When power concentrates in a single pair of hands, controlling the army, the law, the economy, and the culture simultaneously, no mechanism of balance remains. No oversight. No counterweight. What is left is waiting for the man to die or be killed. And even when that moment comes, the system does not end. It only finds someone new. Suetonius calls Caligula the best of slaves and the worst of masters. He had learned tyranny by performing perfect submission, shaped in the court of Tiberius, watching a despot operate from the inside. He had observed every method, every psychological tool, and then improved upon them. That is the true warning. That is the real lesson. The greatest threats do not announce themselves. They learn. They adapt. They wear the mask of loyalty until they no longer need it. And there is one further detail. After Claudius took the throne, he had many of Caligula's records destroyed. Ledgers, letters, documents eliminated. What we know today rests largely on the accounts assembled by historians like Suetonius and Tacitus, writing decades after the events, working from memories and rumors. Which means the 5 acts you have just witnessed, the systematic terror, the constructed machine, are the fragments that survived the purge. Consider what was lost. In an empire that crucified men and threw them to lions, imagine how shattering the things deemed necessary to erase from history must have been. Caligula reigned for 3 years, 9 months, and 8 days. In that time, he left behind a model, a template showing every tyrant who would follow exactly how human beings could be broken systematically and psychologically. And that model never fully disappeared. It is still there. It leaves us alone with a final question.